Do you guys remember, and I know you do, all the billionaires that were at Trump's inauguration? Yeah, these are some of the people that are wanting to see, that are so excited about this, consolidation of IT purchases through the GSA, because now maybe they can sell Trump. They can get government contracts. Just look how happy Zuckerberg is. Look at that smile. Why do you think that is?
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hello all, and welcome to Status Coup. My name is Zainab Day, and boy, do I have a crazy story for you guys today. Have you ever heard of the General Services Administration? Well, it's a go-between between federal contracts and agencies that procure or buy those federal contracts from companies that provide services. Everything from IT tech to the trucks that the Postal Service drives around goes through the GSA, the General Services Administration. And there has been some crazy things that have been happening within the GSA since Trump and the de facto president, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, has taken over the US government since Trump was elected and DOGE was implemented. And some of those things are regarding the way that government contracts are authorized for these federal agencies. And man, there's been some crazy things that have happened. Offices that are shut down, a new executive order that takes some autonomy away from government agencies to decide what their agencies need themselves, as well as more opportunity for the billionaires in the cabinet to be able to capitalize on these changes that we're seeing in the administration. So we're going to be talking about that today. What the heck has been going on the last several weeks with the GSA? And the story is absolutely crazy. We've been seeing some bits and pieces of this story shared through the mainstream media, but to be honest with you, it's been pretty sporadic and here and there. So I've pulled it all together in one place because Status Coup often covers what is not covered. And I'm bringing this to you guys today. It's insane. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about what the General Services Administration, or the SGA, does. It was established in 1949 through the Federal Property and Administration Services Act. It was supposed to be an economical and efficient system, it said, for core procurement services, meaning for, like I had said before, these agencies to be able to purchase goods and services that they need from contractors, from private contractors. Generally, other companies and things like that will provide services, equipment, things like that government agencies need to function. There are several things that are done through this. It's facilities and construction, industrial products and services, transportation, logistics, medical services, and information technology. Now, there's a couple of agencies that don't go through the SGA. The DOJ and the DHS don't, and still don't, under the new executive order, which is really telling when we get into the executive order because of what's going on there. And so far, NASA doesn't go through the General Services Administration either, but we don't really know if that's going to change or if that's going to stay the same, because the executive order wasn't exactly 100% clear on that. We're going to take a look at what happened with the executive order, but first I have a crazy story to tell you that is all tied into this, that happened around the end of February, I suppose. And Elon Musk set his eyes on this obscure office that's called F-18, within the GSA. And we're going to kind of look at what happened with that. I'm going to go over this story because it's absolutely insane. He put out a tweet that said that this department was quote unquote woke and has been deleted, which sent the employees at this office into a tizzy and a frenzy because they were still working. They hadn't caught any word yet that they were going to be, fired, I guess, as Trump would have said. Had no clue what was going on. They just see this tweet that their office is deleted and they start asking questions, and that they were deleted because they were woke, and they don't even know what the hell this means. Let's take a look at the article here. It is from, let's see, The Guardian. So email shows that Musk ally is moving to close office behind free tax filing program at IRS. So this office was the one that was kind of overseeing the new free tax software. And I don't know if you guys had seen the news story, but there's a possibility we're not going to have those services anymore. So we're going to be looking at having, which is something that tax services that are paid for, such as H&R Block and others, have been lobbying against this free tax software for a while. But this free tax software saved Americans a lot of money when it came to filing their taxes. But the Trump administration set their eye on this office and on closing down that program, which is not great. But this is all kind of wrapped into that as well. So email shows that Musk ally is moving to close office behind free tax filing program at IRS. Program is apparently being closed, according to email from Tesla engineer installed in GSA. So as you guys know, Elon Musk had fired the heads of several departments. The GSA was one, and hired people that are working through DOGE. And a lot of these heads of these departments that he hired are Elon Musk loyalists, former employees, former interns that are young, in their very early 20s, some in their teens. He's paying them like $160, $180, $200,000 a year for these positions that have no experience and have never had any experience in these departments. And that's who these people in this office received an email from, was from one of Musk's little minions that he's hired under DOGE. Musk claimed in early February, so this happened in early February, the office within the General Services Administration that created the IRS direct filing program would be deleted. An Elon Musk ally installed at the U.S. government said in a late night email going into Saturday that the office behind a popular free online tax filing option would be shuttered and its employees would be let go. The F-18 office within the General Services Administration created the IRS direct file program that allows for free online tax filings. It has been a frequent target of Musk, and one of the billionaire business's close associates holds a key position in the GSA, and informed staffers that the agencies would close the Office 18F in an email to staffers that arrived around 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. According to the message, the firings were in support of the executive order Donald Trump issued beginning his second U.S. presidency, which has empowered Musk under DOGE task force to cut federal workers. The 18F office has identified as part of the phase of GSA's reduction in force, RIF, as non-critical. So this office that allows people to file their taxes for free has been considered non-critical. This decision was made with explicit direction from top levels of leadership within both the administration of the GSA, so the new hire, the new head of the GSA that Elon Musk installed. There are no other TTS programs impacted at this time. However, we anticipate more change in the future, and there will be more change coming, and we'll be talking about that later on in the segment. The email from Thomas Sayed, a 28-year-old former Tesla software engineer, who took over in late January as head of the GSA's Technology Transformation Services. It's not immediately clear what may happen to 18F programs such as the direct filing system or the total number of workers that the GSA is firing from the office, which has about 90 employees. Musk claimed in early February that he had deleted 18F while responding on X to a right-wing influencer who accused the agency of being far left. Musk didn't elaborate on his statement, which caused confusion, obviously, as the 18F website and services like its direct file program remain online. In addition to working on the free text program, the 18F office worked across government agencies to update technology and launch new software products. It worked on more than 31 projects across different government agencies in 2024, including cybersecurity and infrastructure security. That's not great. It has been part of the GSA since 2014. Shortly after taking over TTS, Shed told staffers that he planned to run the agency like a tech startup. Oh boy. And that he wanted to implement artificial intelligence programs throughout the government. The GSA is one of the major agencies that Musk and his allies have taken over as part of their potentially illegal dismantling of federal government, which has cut services such as humanitarian aid and disease prevention while attempting to reshape agencies along ideological lines. So let's take a look here. I have one more article about this that I want to show you guys. So this says, Elon Musk, DOGE, shuts down the GSA technology unit. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has been at it again, instructing the General Services Administration to eliminate its technology consulting unit known as 18F. The decision first emerged on Saturday, but it remains, and this has been several weeks back, the end of February. Just to remind everyone, this is just part of the overarching story that we're getting at today. News of the decision first emerged on Saturday, but remains unclear how many workers have been affected. The decision to cut 18F has its critics, one of the most notable being billionaire Mark Cuban, who previously campaigned for Vice President Kamala Harris this year and has been critical of Trump in a social media post. Cuban called for 18F's former staffers to group together and start a consulting company in response to their dismissal. I'm not sure how that would help. Just a matter of time before DOGE needs you to fix the mess they inevitably create, Cuban said. They will have to hire your company as a contractor to fix it, but on your terms. And I'm happy to invest or help. So that's just one of several of the things we'll be talking about today. So one of the first things they did in February, shortly after coming into office, was to go after this specific GSA office, 18F, and one that oversees technology, one that that had our tax services for free, but then one that also securities and investment. That's very alarming that would be one of the first targets that DOGE goes after, is an agency that is involved with procuring contracts for AI and digital services. Now, I know that they call themselves tech support, but instead of cleaning up tech at agencies, they go to the place where it oversees procurement, what procurement is the decision of who they are going to be buying software and products from. All right, let's talk about what happened next. So right after all of this happened, the very first meeting for DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, was held by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And there's some interesting speakers there. A lot of them were criticizing. It was actually called the War on Waste. stamping out the scourge of improper payments and fraud. And it was individuals that a lot of them, there were 4 people on the panel. Of the 3, it was proponents who were essentially pitching different kinds of products to track fraud, a fraud that does not exist, completely ignoring the fact that there was oversight previous to this through inspectors generals, which Trump and Musk have gutted, and that there was already insights into how frequent improper payments are, what kind of improper payments are made, and that, fraud is only less than 1% in most of these agencies, from SNAP benefits to TANF to, worker programs, welfare, Medicaid, Medicare. Fraud at the individual, the person receiving, is extremely, extremely low. Now, when we look at all of this, we have to consider Trump's executive order. So before I get into what happened at that agency, or at the first DOGE meeting, I want to go over what Trump's executive order said so that you can keep that in mind while we listen to what a couple of people have said at the first DOGE meeting. This executive order came in just last week, just a couple of days ago. And I think that it's extraordinarily telling when it comes to what they're focusing on and essentially monopolizing the contract structure, contract acquisition, who they choose as contracts, pulling it out from under Congress, pulling it out from some autonomy of these agencies, and placing it solidly under the president, under the executive branch, where Trump's administration and DOGE has almost now primary selection for who gets what contracts. Let's take a look here. Trump executive order consolidates federal IT contracting under GSA. GSA will be given authority to defer or decline being the executive IT agent if government-wide contracts, when necessary to ensure continuity of services or as otherwise appropriate, is what the executive order says. President Donald Trump signed an executive order, and this is from FedScoop. President Donald Trump signed an executive order Thursday to consolidate the contracting of common goods and services, including information technology, under the General Services Administration. Within 30 days of the order's issuance, GSA will take over as the executive agent of all government-wide acquisition contracts, or GWACs, for IT. Now, I will be clear, the executive order does not say just for IT. It says for any kind of procurement under a GWAC contract. As designed by the Office of Management and Budget, consolidating domestic federal procurement in the General Services Administration, the agency designed to conduct procurement, so to make these purchases, will eliminate waste and duplication while enabling agencies to focus on their core mission of delivering the best possible services for American people, the executive order says. As part of the GSA's new role, the administration will be able to defer or decline being the executive agent of IT government-wide contracts when necessary to ensure continuity of services or as otherwise appropriate. So I want to stop here for a second. Now, when it comes to continuity of services, NOAA, the National Weather Service, may need completely different IT tech and services than something like the USPS or the National Institute of Health. All of these agencies may need to do their management slightly different depending, or the USDA, depending on what their workload is, what their needs are. consolidation of what types of services are used might not be the best route. And then if you have people making these decisions about what they need that are not in the agencies, but are these little DOGE minions that have never done this work before, then what the hell are they going to do? Are they going to dismantle these programs by the way of rendering them ineffective? I think that is part of the strategy here. Other major GWAC for technology across the federal government include the National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Health Information Technology Acquisition and Assessment Center vehicles like C10 SP3s and embattled CIO SP4, as well as NASA Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement, SEWP contracts. The order does not clarify what will happen to those non-GSA IT contracts and the staff that support them. Additionally, GSA's administration will lead efforts to rationalize government-wide indefinite delivery contract vehicles for information technologies for agencies across the government, including as part of identifying and eliminating contract duplication, redundancy, and other inefficiencies, the order says. Trump's executive order comes after GSA last month sent a memo to federal agencies telling them to find paths to eliminate contracts with the top 10 highest paid consulting firms across the federal government, which acting administration Stephen Eckian says are set to make $65 billion in fees in 2025 and beyond. So I'm all for cutting government spending, but cutting the top 10 highest paid consulting firms without knowing exactly what they do, I don't know about that. Maybe it could be great, but also that seems like a pretty blanketed demand without knowing what services are being provided. If there's people that are monitoring our nuclear facilities, which some had been fired, or working to ensure that we don't have any pandemics at the NIH, which some people were fired, that were doing Ebola investigations. We may not want to get rid of contracts that are keeping us safe, so it'd be important to know what's being cut. OMB will send out guidelines sometime in the next 2 weeks to agencies on how to move forward with implementing this order's efforts to consolidate IT contracting, it says. While the order focuses on IT contracts, it sets a broad charge for agency leaders to work with contracting officers within the next 60 days to send proposals to GSA to transfer domestic procurement with respect to common goods and services for the agency where permitted by law. So like I had mentioned, it doesn't just stop with IT. If a forest worker that works for the Federal Forest Agency needs to, some group within the Federal Forestry Service needs to hire several chainsaws, it has to go through this agency now. And Trump even uses that example if you have to, purchase a bandsaw in this executive order. And so it just seems insane to me that to purchase a bandsaw or an axe or a new vehicle for the Postal Service, that has to go through this bureaucracy, this red tape every time. So while DOGE claims it's cutting bureaucracy, it's making it easier for government to function, this is more efficient, they're actually consolidating power into the executive branch. Consolidating power into the executive branch. So yeah, that's the executive order that has came down the pike. So we're going to talk next about what this means. So this could mean anything from shipment of weather balloons to NOAA, research kits for the National Institute of Health, scuba gear for people that are working in Customs and not Customs and Border Patrol, but working for the national rescue agencies, on and on, as well as any other uses, and including software. I had mentioned to you some of the things that GSA, everything from health services to real estate, where offices are going to be. And when we're looking at the massive amount of conflicts of interest in Trump's cabinet, this is very concerning. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Guess who doesn't have to do this, though? The Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security. They'll have free reign over their own acquisitions with still limited transparency and still limited oversight. And who are our biggest spenders? Who spends the most tax dollars? The Department of Homeland Security and the DHS. The Pentagon lost $4 billion. $4 billion was lost last review of their expenditures. Every time there is a review of their expenditures, they fail the review and they've misplaced billions of dollars. Every time. The last seven analyses, they have failed. And for some reason, it's still not under this umbrella. That is not going to be scrutinized with a fine point pen. While eradicating redundancy sounds amazing, there are a litany of issues that can rise. It can price out smaller contracting services that, might be small businesses that some of these agencies use while they're trying to consolidate. They can essentially create more monopoly within government expenditures. So instead of contracting out to someone small and local for something, we're looking at a potential more monopolization from organizations like the Vanguard, BlackRock, what have you, for government services. Having every single purchase go through GSA when it's as simple as like park service workers for a handsaw can actually hinder their capabilities. And then what might happen when these agencies are hindered is that the Trump administration can turn around and Congress can turn around, the GOP in Congress, the Trump administration can turn around and argue that these agencies like the United Postal Service, the National Institute of Health, need to be privatized. They've already privatized our prison system. The ACA was a form of privatization of the healthcare system, which put it in the hands of insurance companies. There has been a march toward privatization for a long time, and this may ramp up the speed, ramp up the accelerant on privatization by way of making these organizations like the USDA and others, hampering them with so much bureaucracy, more bureaucracy, not less, that renders them actually ineffective and unproductive. And then an argument can be made after that they need to be privatized, which is the ultimate goal, just like the recent dismantling of the Department of Education. It's not transparent, it's not efficient, and this is not their aim. Do you guys remember, and I know you do, all the billionaires that were at Trump's inauguration? You guys remember those guys? Yeah. These are some of the people that are wanting to see, that are so excited about this, consolidation of IT purchases through the GSA, because now maybe they can sell Trump their, not Trump, but the administration. They can get government contracts. Elon Musk gets billions of dollars in government contracts per year. I think it's something like 32 billion in government contracts that he's taken so far. That's why he's a billionaire. Our government subsidized him all the way up to be one of the richest men in the world, if not the richest man in the world. Just look how happy Zuckerberg is. Look at that smile. Why do you think that is? These were people that traditionally donated to Democrats, and I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm independent. Both parties are corrupt as hell. These billionaires, they game the system and they play both parties. That's what they do. There's a reason that there were so many billionaires at this inauguration. There are so many billionaires in this cabinet, and the reason why they are super duper excited about what's coming down the pike. We're going to talk a little bit about the very first DOGE meeting, because I want you guys to hear what happened there, and I want you to hear the business pitches, and I want you to hear the BS, and then I want to talk a little bit about the companies that these people were pitching that were at the very first DOGE meeting, because the very first DOGE meeting wasn't necessarily about government inefficiency. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about that, to be honest. It was, there's so much fraud in the Social Security Administration, which isn't true. There's so much fraud in SNAP and food stamps, not true. There's so much fraud in Medicaid. There is some fraud in Medicaid, but it's not on the user end of people that get their health care. It's on the end of the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies overcharging or not providing services. So we're going to take a listen to this guy named Haywood Talcove. And what Talcove does is he works for a company called LexisNexis. And LexisNexis contracts with the government right now for billions of dollars. And this guy, he works in government affairs, and he does screenings. He does do screenings for things like fraud. However, I will note that what he is saying here is very different than what was found by the OIG or the Inspector Generals, the offices of the Inspector General, where all this is publicly available, and it's showing that there's only 0.85% fraud within the Social Security Administration, and that most of the payments that are the improper payments are actually paid back. And that's most of what happens. Most of it gets paid back because most of the quote unquote, the improper payments are people that died within a month or two and waiting for that information to come in. And then the people who receive the funds, the family members, will often send those funds back. So the majority of it, 76% of improper payments get paid back, and only 0.85, so not even 1% of total payments are improper payments, and 75% of those get paid back. But let's hear what he has to say. Let's kind of hear a little bit of the yarn he spun at the first DOGE
Honest and deserving
hearing.
people seeking access to government benefits suffer through endless application forms that are nearly impossible to navigate. But criminals from Russia, China, and Romania gain access with ease. The private sector has fraud rates below 3%. Meanwhile, the public sector operates at a 20% fraud rate. The solution is clear. It's already used every day to protect consumers. You seamlessly interact with your bank through an app that verifies your identity in milliseconds. There's no excuse for the government to lag if we do the following. Number one, implement identity verification on the front end. Criminals should never receive a dime. Eliminate self-certification. No more honor system for billion-dollar programs. And continuous auditing. Keep verifying because criminals never stop adapting. I urge Congress to consider making the following legislative changes. Number one, update the 1974 Privacy Act to allow for data sharing and matching. Number two, fund a budget for fraud prevention in each appropriation bill. The USDA spends 1/20th of 1% on fraud prevention. Mandate that individuals caught stealing from entitlement programs pay hefty fines and are removed from the program permanently. And finally, eliminate broad-based categorical eligibility.
Mr. Talcove, Do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%. And it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification.
Yeah, bullshit. Total and utter bullshit. 20% compared to 3% in the private industry. What did I just tell you guys? It's less than 1% fraud. And this has been easily verifiable. You could look it up. Office of Inspector General, less than 1%, and a large percentage of that is paid back. He is lying. Why is he lying? Well, the Chief Executive Officer for Government Division of LexisNexis Solutions is talking about a front-end ID verification system. Why might he be talking about a front-end ID verification system? Well, maybe because LexisNexis Risk Solutions just acquired AI identity verification firm IDverse. What does IDverse do? LexisNexis Risk Solutions has announced plans to acquire IDverse, an AI-powered identity verification and document authentication company. And this acquisition is expected to be closed in early 2025, pending regulatory approvals. So he's pitching front-end ID under these claims that there's 20% fraud and that it's all these foreign countries that are getting Medicaid, which is absolutely insane, or getting Social Security. Not true. Absolutely false. And why? Likely because LexisNexis just secured a contract or just purchased themselves an AI ID system. So of course he wants a front-end ID verification system. And one of the things that's kind of creepy about this whole ID verification system that they have acquired is that it's like one of those, it's either fingerprint, there's like biometric scanning and stuff that's involved. So imagine them coming and like scanning your grandma's eyeball to make sure that she's who she says she is, so that she can get Medicaid and SNAP benefits or Social Security, which she paid in for her entire life. That's what we're looking at. Front-end ID verification from LexisNexis Solutions. Well, let's take a look. LexisNexis gets so much money in federal contracts already right now. $82.38 million from the department for the contracts with the Department of Homeland Security. And this is all from USA Spending. .gov, which anyone can go to, look up themselves, but that is where these screenshots are from. Social Security Administration, they already get $46.59 million. Office of Personnel Management, OPM, $40.24 million. Department of Justice, the DOJ, $23 million. Department of Treasury, $23 million. Department of Defense, $18 million. GSA, $14 million. SBA, $4 million. What kinds of things do they do? IT and telecom services. Support for administrative credit reporting. More IT and web-based subscriptions. And again, this is all from usaspending.gov, which is already transparent, which is already out there, which you can already find. And I wonder how long this website is going to stay up. But you can find this all right now yourself, and it was up long before Trump was in office. There's another group. I just want to give you another example of the kind of contracting firms that might be going through the GSA that do spending. And this one is called KPMG. And they do IT and tech too. They also do things like IDverse would be doing, and KPMG often partners with LexisNexis on programs and initiatives. $2.6 billion with the Department of Defense, $470 million with the Department of Health and Human Family Services, Department of Energy, $224 million, DHS, $210 million. This is a massive conglomerate, and look how much money they're taking. And at the first DOGE meeting, they want to talk about these, this fraud that isn't happening, rather than looking at these agencies that take so much money from the government for contracts. And instead, there's an executive order that went out on Friday of last week saying that all of this is going to be now consolidated under Trump, specifically under DOGE, under the minions that are at working at the behest, these loyalists working at the behest of Musk. KPMG, this was an interesting article I found from 2009 talking about the audits for Medicare. And these audits were for fraud and, for false claims and that sort of thing. There was a problem with these audits, and they had found that there was KPMG was reporting things that were inaccurate, caused all kinds of problems, and were cited for this. And one of the people who helped to investigate it under the House Committee, under the House Commerce Committee, stated, "It's beyond comprehensible that HCFA, in an effort to fight Medicare and fraud, would hire the fox to guard the hen house." So we're still doing work with these people to evaluate what's happening within the government, and they're using it for their own benefit. And it's very ironic that this guy wants to talk about, that Talco wants to talk about fraud when it comes to grandmas with Social Security, and make up this 20% number when the fraud is often coming from these massive contracts that he's trying to get more procurement for himself with a front-end ID verification system that he came to the first DOGE meeting to make a sales pitch about. So there's one more clip that I would love to show you from the very first DOGE meeting, and this is from Dylan Hetler got it, and he's the director of government affairs for POGO. And POGO was founded in the early 80s, and it was actually an agency that is a nonprofit agency that looks at things like government fraud, abuse, spending, that sort of thing, and evaluates where most of the waste, fraud, and abuse is from. And in his talk at the first DOGE hearing, and of course he was brought on, I believe, by some of the Democratic Party members on the committee, he was talking about a lot of the fraud being within the Department of Defense, and that a lot of the fraud is the contracting firms that contract with the agent or with the government rather than the people themselves. And he even noted that the fraud rate for things like Social Security are extremely low. He talks about some of the things that have been done to curb fraud. And in that, he says that, inspector generals were brought on a couple decades ago to help curb fraud. Whistleblower protections for agencies were implemented, which both of those things the Trump administration has already rolled back protections on. Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act was implemented. The Data Act was implemented, which is why we have usaspending.gov. And he talks here about multiple inspector generals being fired as soon as Trump took over. So he fired the people that were already doing oversight of waste, fraud, and abuse. This was already happening, which they act like it's not, and it hasn't been happening, but it was. And I'm not saying the government is perfect. I'm saying there's a lot that could be fixed. However, what DOGE is doing is dishonest. Let's take a listen here to what he has to say.
Report from the Inspector Generals, and this is the Council of the Inspector Generals, a nonpartisan group on integrity and efficiency in government. They identified more than $93 billion in potential savings. So the first thing that President Trump did coming into office was to fire 17 agency inspectors general. What can you tell us from POGO's standpoint? What does that do to our ability to identify and root out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Thank you, Congressman. I would say, to put it simply, it completely undermines our ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Inspector General exists for essentially one purpose, and they were originally created in the immediate aftermath of Watergate, and I think you all probably do not need me to give you a history lesson at all on what happened in the Watergate era. There's a reason they were created at that time, because there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse happening, and there were not cops on the beat that were internal, that were independent, that were situated in agencies to be able to find these things and expose them and do something about them. That's what Inspector General exists to do. So it's completely anathema to, I'd say anathema to any stated mission to find cost savings and to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, to fire Inspector General and to undermine them. It makes no sense. Those two things do not add.
It makes no sense. It's anathema to fire the Inspector General, 17 Inspector Generals, if you're going to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, let's take a look at why they might be firing so many Inspector Generals. I'll go back. I've got an article to show you about some of those billionaires that have been hired into the Trump cabinet. Let's take a look at who they are. Well, we all know about Elon Musk, worth $439 billion. How about Leonard Rizzo Jr.? His family made billions growing hair product company Conair from a small family business ran out of Queens. He is now worth an estimate $3.5 billion. He briefly served as Trump's principal officer at the U.S. Consulate General in 2020. Warren Stevens, ambassador to the United Kingdom, worth $3.4 billion. He was investment banking firm CEO. Spent $2 million in 2016 to help support Trump after he initially threw his support behind other candidates. Linda McMahon, who has investments in private school education, which doesn't list that here, but she's a big proponent of private school education, is now in charge of the Department of Education. Well, not exactly. The Department of Education has been completely defunct, but she's worth $3 billion herself. Now she is in charge of the SBA, the Small Business Association, which just now got given every contract that anyone has with student loans is now under the Small Business Association of America, which has no capability to handle student loan finance. Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, worth $2.2 billion. He was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald Financial Services, who, as you guys know, was heavily involved in the housing market crash in 2008. So instead of having any recompense for that, he is now Commerce Secretary. Great. Charles Kushner, ambassador to France, $1.8 billion. Jared Isaacman, NASA administrator, $1.8 billion. Was a private sector space exploration company, Shift4 Payments. So yeah, guy was in a private sector space exploration and is now the head of NASA, which thanks Obama for privatizing NASA. That has not helped us at all. Thomas Barak Jr., ambassador to Turkey, $1 billion. Stephen Witkoff, special envoy to the Middle East, $1 billion. is his net worth. Frank Bisiano, Secretary Administrator Commission, 1 billion. Scott Bessett, Treasury Secretary, reported billionaire, doesn't have it listed. Vivek Ramaswamy, 1 billion. David Sachs is the new crypto czar. We don't know exactly how much he's worth, but it's a lot. It's likely within the billions. Kelly Loeffler, administrator of the Small Business Administration, $800 million. Doug Burnham, Interior Secretary, 100 million. And Dr. Oz, 100 million. And he's in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. I can't think of anything more nightmarish than Dr. Oz being in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. So those are some of the billionaires that are now in charge of these branches of the executive branch. And the GSA has now consolidated contracting under DOGE and under the Trump administration umbrella, limiting oversight of acquisitions and contracts when it comes to congressional oversight. Let's take a listen to what one of these clowns had to say. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, had to say about Medicare. About Social Security.
I describe it to people this way.
Last week.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining. And if all the guys who did PayPal, like Elon knows this by heart, right? Anybody who's been in the payment system and the process system knows the easiest way to find the fraudster is to stop payments and listen.
Yeah.
Because whoever screams is the one stealing.
Yeah.
Because my mother-in-law's not calling. Come on, your mother, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, they trust the government. They trust, okay, maybe it got screwed up, big deal. They're not gonna call and scream at someone. But someone who's stealing always does. So what happens is we need to get to, so the people who are getting that free money, stealing the money, inappropriately getting the money, have an inside person who's routing the money, they are going to yell and scream. But real America is going to be rewarded, because here's the key.
Benefit of the doubt.
Not one penny should stop going to, we're the richest country on earth.
Yeah.
Here's the way I say it. I said we have a $6.5 trillion budget. We have $4.5 trillion of revenues.
Yeah.
Okay, we lose $2 trillion a year. Yeah. We have a $29 trillion GDP, right? Which people don't understand, and which I'll explain a little bit. And we have $36 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
What number didn't I say to a business person? What's our balance sheet worth?
Right.
I say $500 trillion.
Right.
The president says a quadrillion. But at $500 trillion or a quadrillion, 36 trillion. We're rich. We don't have to take one penny from someone who deserves Social Security. Not one penny from someone who deserves Medicaid and Medicare. What we have to do is stop sending money to someone who's not hurt.
So, yeah, he says that anyone that complains, we can stop all the checks. And anyone that complains, they're the fraudsters. They're the ones stealing money. If we stop the checks to, for Social Security, the people that complain about not getting the checks because his mother wouldn't complain. He's a billionaire, remind you, CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. Anyone that complains, those are the fraudsters, but not the billionaires with multiple, immeasurable, right now, conflicts of interest, because we don't know their full portfolios. That has not been disclosed for all of them. Some of them are still sitting on boards. He just stepped down as CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald so that he could do this, but that doesn't mean that there's not still immense conflicts of interest. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been billionaires in the government before. Obama had them. Clinton had them. Trump had them in the last administration. Biden. But what is different is the way that the GSA is being organized and the firing of inspector generals. We've always had corruption. That has been a problem, but instead of fixing the corruption, they're making the corruption worse. It's now centralized procurement for all government agencies only weeks after that first hearing of DOGE. Now, I'm not suggesting LexisNexis stage this all. I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting is that there is a cash grab, a potential cash grab coming from all of these contracting agencies, these billionaires, these people that can profit off of this, from people like Lutnick himself, who want to point the finger at people that are getting their due Social Security, for instance, that they paid into themselves, now claiming that if anyone complains about not receiving a check, those are the ones that are the fraudsters. It's all connected. It's all tied in together. Lutnick's claim here is tied into what's happening at the GSA, is tied into why at the very first DOGE meeting, they brought in someone from LexisNexis who, whose company has a profit motive because they've just acquired a new company, IDverse, that does ID monitoring. So all of it is tied together. None of this stuff is in isolation. And that is why it's so alarming that the GSA is taking over things in this way. The GSA has always overseen it, but now the power of the GSA is being somewhat rendered moot. People are being evacuated, fired from the agency, and there's consolidation and monopolization happening within the Trump administration. We're going to take a look at 2 more articles here, and to kind of catch us all completely up to date after the executive order, what's been going on, what other shady business is happening at the GSA, because this isn't the end of the conversation. So, GSA debuts new generative AI tool for workers. The chatbot comes amid anxieties that the federal government could use AI to replace the loss of human capital from recent Trump administration reduction in force. Now, this was reported one day before the executive order was announced, consolidating the GSA into Trump's hands, into completely out of oversight from Congress and completely under the umbrella and all IT. And as I had stated before, other acquisitions as well, under DOGE and under the Trump administration. The General Service Administration on Thursday revealed a new generative AI tool designed to boost efficiency and help automate repetitive tasks. The platform, now available to GSA staff, comes amid anxiety that the Department of Government Efficiency might use artificial intelligence to surveil or replace federal workers who are being laid off in large swaths across the government. The GSA chatbot can access a series of large language models, including technology from Anthropic and Meta. So technology from social media, not great. That resembles other AI chatbots and is designed to respond to use prompts to help staff with basic tasks like writing. The tool reflects our productive approach to innovation and our commitment to providing secure and effective solutions tailored to the unique needs of government work. Stephen Eckerin, the acting administrator of GSA, said in a statement, the opportunity to incorporate generative AI into government work is akin to giving personal computer to every worker. We are just at the start of this journey using this new tool, but demand for this technology exists across GSA and the broader government. Earlier this month, Wired responded that the DOGE had deployed a chatbot called GSAI for 1,500 workers, according to Wired. The tool had been developed for several months, but DOGE accelerated the rollout to the platform and eventually wants to use it for data analysis and contracts procurement. So DOGE wants to use an AI for contract procurement that's overseen by the richest man in the world who already has $34 billion in government contracts himself. So an AI tool to help scrub for government contracts. I could see this, and this is my opinion, potentially being used for him to scrub for things that him and his buddies can make money off of, and for them to be able to further monopolize the government, and without oversight from inspector generals, without oversight from employees that used to work at these agencies. There's no checks and balances to this whatsoever. GSA said in a Thursday statement it is encouraging all of its staff to test the tool. The tool's deployment follows the elimination of 18F, which we talked about earlier, how he went in and eliminated this office from the GSA, a digital service team that helped federal agencies build technology platforms and make efficient software purchases, and the slimming down of technology transformation services, a technology consulting group based within the GSA. So they've gutted this group that was already hired within the GSA and instead replaced it with DOGE and replaced it with Elon in order to oversee all federal contracts. With the chatbot, GSA wanted to take an approach that wasn't dependent on a single vendor or an agency official familiar with its development said. The primary goal of the tool is to promote a cultural shift toward using AI, the office said. The tool is being measured based on adoption, not hours or workers saved. The person emphasized the staff from the TTS and IT employees within the GSA helped build the tool. Now, I'm curious as to if this TTS and IT employees within GSA are the people that, Musk put in, or were they current employees? This article is unclear. The GSA official said the tool is not meant to be used to make official agency decisions, that the models are walled off from any GSA knowledge bases. There are also safety controls built into the system meant to prevent personal and sensitive information from being shared. The agency isn't classifying conversations with the chatbot as federal records prompts, but are being logged. Eventually, the agency wants to expand the tool so that other agencies can use it and develop an API to offer access to the models. GSA, which is using a manager model service for the chatbot, says it expects to incorporate more models in the future. We want to understand how this tool fits into day-to-day workflows and where adjustments are needed to maximize its value. Zach Whitman, the agency chief AI officer and data officer, said in a statement. So we're unsure what this means. Who developed it? Who exactly implemented it? And what it's going to be used for in the future? And what kind of conversations is it monitoring when it has access to social media? And why were everyone fired from 18F and DOGE take it over in order to implement this AI bot? There are lots of questions still hanging with this. And then I do have one final story to share with you guys. And this one, I believe, just came out yesterday or today. Let's see. So Musk, who already has $38 billion in government contracts, is potentially aiming to secure a number of other contracts. So to all the people that are like, he's a billionaire, you know, MAGA may be watching this, maybe some people that support Trump. He's a billionaire. Why would he want to, you know, he's already got so much money. His conflicts of interest don't matter because he wouldn't be doing this. He's not even being paid to do this, as if, you know, the richest man in the world would need to be paid. He said himself he wants to be the world's first trillionaire. That is one of his goals. He wants to go to Mars. He has all of these goals he wants to do. And the way that he's become a billionaire is off of billions and billions in federal contracts already. If it was in his heart to help, why doesn't he just do this stuff for free? But let's take a look here. There is a story about Starlink contracts and what could be potentially coming down the pike. We had heard, and he says that it's not true, that he was attempting to acquire some of Verizon's contracts for Starlink a couple weeks ago. So there's been some news in and out about this, but let's take a look at this latest article from The Guardian that just came out yesterday. DOGE cuts allow Musk to cash in with SpaceX and Starlink contracts, ex-workers warn. Tech CEO accused of aiming to privatize space and satellite operations as federal agencies reportedly seek contracts. So remember, we don't know what portions of NASA are going to fall under this new change with the GSA. And this is by Tom Perkins. We also don't know exactly how it's going to work with procurement now that it has been consolidated under this last executive order, specifically under the Trump administration. And all of this is happening so fast. Elon Musk appears to be laying down the groundwork to privatize some space and satellite operations now under the authority of the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration. So this is under NOAA. So this would fall under the latest change to the GSA to steer lucrative contracts toward his SpaceX and Starlink's companies, former agency employees say. These are former employees that worked for NOAA. They're sounding the alarm, thank God for whistleblowers, as at least 4 other agencies have reportedly begun pushing new contracts toward Musk's Starlink satellite internet company. Musk, the world's largest man, has been tasked by Donald Trump with drastically slashing the federal government and workforce costs. The situation raises conflict of interest questions for one of Trump's closest allies who backed him with millions of dollars of funding in the 2024 election. Musk boasts that his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, slashes spending, but critics say he's using his position to steer government funding toward his companies. NOAA could offer the biggest prizes yet for Musk, presenting the opportunity for SpaceX to have a commanding financial advantage in a commercial U.S. space market expected to grow to a value of nearly $2 trillion over the next decade. Already, DOGE likely has access to competitors' confidential business information at NOAA, former employees of the agency say. Most importantly for the public, it would put control of the nation's communications infrastructure in the hands of a right-wing billionaire. NOAA's activity quietly touches the basic functions of daily life and everything from dependable cell phone service to how Americans connect to the internet and to weather forecasting. Those are all the things that are at stake. 5 former NOAA employees who spoke with The Guardian said, "There's a lot of smoke, but we're not sure where the fire is yet," a former employee said. "We're waiting to see when the next shoe drops." In the wake of a firing spree that gutted some NOAA space operations, Donald Trump Jr.'s investment firm stoked speculation by purchasing $50 million worth of SpaceX shares. So Donald Trump Jr. went and bought $50 million worth of SpaceX shares. NOAA operates as part of the U.S. Commerce Department and is responsible for a range of economic activity relied upon by the public. Musk's DOGE team has laid off about 1,300 NOAA staff so far. Good God. SpaceX primarily launches rockets and satellites for Musk and national governments. Starlink, meanwhile, has nearly 6,000 satellites in low Earth orbit and provides satellite broadband internet services and military communications to at least 2.7 million people in 100 countries. SpaceX is the biggest player in the private space industry, and several former NOAA employees praises the company as an often good partner prior to Musk's attack on the agency. The space technology company had strong momentum prior to the new Trump administration, making it difficult to parse what is legitimate business and what can be construed as corrupt, former employees say. A new Emergency Freedom Information Act, a new FOIA request for communications among NOAA offices and DOGE in part seeks to shine some light on those questions. The Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, or PEER, request noted that privatization of the agency has long been the goal of the right. That's true. The right has been trying to privatize NOAA for about 25 years now, and trying to bring all of our weather services specifically into privatized companies' hands, which could be disastrous. That could mean if you needed to get a tornado warning, you would have to pay for that service, potentially. Or those services would become so expensive and be rendered somewhat useless. Not great. The danger is that Musk's enterprises could morph into government-sponsored monopolies that would operate with no fear of antitrust prosecution, which is what I was telling you before about the consolidation of GSA under the umbrella of Donald Trump alone and this administration. New contracts for Starlink. Leadership for the Federal Aviation Administration ordered staff in February to find tens of millions of dollars in funding for new Starlink contracts, Rolling Stone reported. The FFA is in the process of updating agencies' air traffic control networks, and last award year, a $2.5 billion contract to Verizon, but Starlink has already edged into the process. So they're already trying to edge into the FFA, which is also under the GSA. At the U.S. Government Services Administration, DOGE ordered federal staffers to use Starlink for internal services, an employee told NBC News. Another agency plans to contract with Starlink, according to federal employees familiar with the situation who spoke with NBC News. Meanwhile, Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, recently authorized an evaluation of Starlink to help monitor the border. That's kind of creepy. I don't like the idea of Starlink monitoring incoming migrants nor monitoring U.S. citizens. Gutting space traffic control. The nascent space Space Traffic Coordination Program manages thousands of satellite debris and spacecraft and helps prevent up to 50,000 near collisions called conjunctions daily. Starlink accounts for a number of those. There are with all of the clutter from Starlink, it's causing all kinds of problems. You can't see the stars, NASA's saying, for them to be able to do the research. There's been a ton of collisions. There's been debris that have fallen down. So more satellites could cause more environmental problems as well. Called the Traffic Coordination System for Space, or TRACS, the program would also eventually provide launch and re-entry services for commercial satellites and spacecraft. Former employees said Musk company already works closely with TRACS, but the program has avoided vendor lock and contracts with multiple companies in no small part because Musk agency may not always align with the nation's, one former official said. SpaceX is a great service provider, but as long as he's in control of the company, it's not anything that can't be counted on, a former NOAA employee said. Those who spoke with The Guardian said it didn't appear that SpaceX had any interest in privatizing or taking over TRACS prior to Trump's reelection, but Musk DOGE fired all but one TRACS member, in effect crippling sorely needed operations that could open the door for privatization. And SpaceX is positioned for the privatization of that agency as well. So now we're looking at what have they covered in this article so far? NOAA. We're looking at TRACS. We're looking at the FFA that could be privatized. We're looking at AI, IT across the entire government that could be monopolized by Musk himself. Weather forecasting privatization, the article goes on. NOAA satellites in lower Earth orbit are largely utilized to forecast weather 3 to 7 days out, and the data is given for free to weather forecasting providers such as AccuWeather and utilized in aviation, shipping, defense, and other critical industries. Some companies want to profit off the data, and a few are better positioned than Musk to land contracts or take over. But private industry data and forecasts are of extremely poor quality compared to those from NOAA. a former employee said, which was what I was mentioning before. We could get worse. We wouldn't know. And this is critical. It is critical with climate change on the rise, with everything else that is happening. It is critical to know what kind of dangers are coming down the pike when it comes to weather. NOAA weather satellites have redundancies and fail-safes intentionally built in. A huge effort is put into calibrating them with weather on Earth. NOAA flies airplanes into storms to confirm that data its satellites are providing is accurate, for example. The data is highly reliable, 24/7, no breakdowns, no ifs, ands, or buts, a former agency employee said. If NOAA satellites fail, explode, or crash, they added, then people who rely on that data may die or serious economic damage may be inflicted. The risk of having outages is so significant because that data is used all the time for everything and for so far more than people realize, a former employee said. Musk, by contract, has a mission of eliminating redundancies and finding efficiencies. And former agency employees noted his rockets and satellites have a history of crashing and exploding. Meanwhile, NOAA monitors space weather, including solar flares, coronas, and radiation, and geometric storms that can damage the electric grid and telecommunications on Earth and beyond, that could have implications for Musk's well-known plans to colonize Mars. If you're serious about sending people to Mars, then you have to be able to monitor and respond to space weather. Makes sense. Radio frequencies. SpaceX, telecoms giants, and other industries are lobbying the federal government to auction off valuable brands of radio frequency spectrum and electromagnetic waves that enable wireless communication, including among the military, CIA, NOAA, and other satellites. The obscure function is essentially to a wide range of commercial activities such as cell phone use and industry wants to get their hands on all that they can because it's a finite resource, a former agency employee said. A large part of NOAA's forecast stem from its satellites monitoring water vapor movement in the atmosphere, and the agency owns the radio frequencies at which vapor vibrates. That's very interesting and very specific. If the Musk-aligned FCC sells bands too close to that frequency, potential interference could impede on satellite function and disrupt reliable weather forecasting and cell phone use. Starlink wants more and more spectrum, and you hope the FEC would not be stupid enough to auction off bands next to where water vibrates, but I wouldn't put it past anybody, an employee said. Great work from The Guardian and Tom Perkins in this interview, in these interviews, in this article. It really puts into focus why the consolidation of the GSA and government acquisitions is so important. Because all of these things that all of these employees are worried about, that they just spoke about in this article, are now being consolidated and monopolized under this last executive order that was signed at the end of last week. And we already see how some of these things are starting to come to fruition. We already saw that they are doing this with AI monitoring. And we saw that that a CEO from a chief executive officer from LexisNexis was speaking at the DOGE hearing, trying to pitch his company's ID-verse for identification services for things like Medicaid and Medicare and SSI, Social Security, under the guise that there's this massive amount of fraud that's happening. So if they start doing this with every single agency, with these agencies under NOAA, National Institute of Health, and others, and if Musk starts privatizing these essential services, such as the contracts he's already aiming for now under the FFA and already securing now under the FFA, we're in big trouble, folks. And that's why I know this was a bit of a longer show and it may have been a bit winding, but what they're calling efficiency and savings sounds great on its face, but with the current trajectory of this government, The seizings of sectors by these tech moguls and by these companies that invested in the Trump administration, by those billionaires, these guys are what we have to worry about, because that could very well be coming down the pike. 17 inspector generals were fired. We do not have oversight. The Consumer Protection Financial Bureau was gutted. All oversight has been gutted. And this was part of Project 2025, but it's also part of the techno bros whole techno monarchy spiel that they have going on of wanting to, consolidate government under monopolies. This isn't necessarily smaller government. This isn't an effort in order to all of a sudden give you, $100 back on your paycheck from your taxes as a tax cut that people think they're going to get. This money is being aimed at privatization and our tax, less federal workers that work for us specifically to do the common good, and more companies purchasing services to which then they may charge us more for those services. So not only would they get paid by the government, but then they're going to charge us for services. That's what they're aiming to do. Dismantle the government, privatize everything that they potentially can, and do it with very limited oversight. So it is important that we keep our eyes open to what is coming down the pike. And I thank everyone for sitting with me for almost an hour and a half to go through all of this. Like I said, I do know it was winding, but I think it was really important to pull the strings together and knit together for you guys what is happening. It's happening so fast, and government procurement is changing at an extraordinarily rapid pace. And we are looking at some potential privatizations of everything from our postal service to our National Weather Service and beyond, and the potentiality of the richest man in the world getting even richer, as well as a lot of his buddies and potentially a lot of the people that are in Trump's cabinet. And yes, I will say this has been happening for years. This isn't anything new as far as the privatization of the government has been a slow roll, but it has been happening, such as privatized prisons. CoreCivic now owns almost all migration detention centers, for instance, and the CEO of CoreCivic was just bragging about how much money he's going to make off the Trump administration. But let's just multiply that by almost every government agency on top of it. There was already a fire, accelerant has been poured on it, and now we have a bonfire. And it is happening at an insanely rapid pace because we're not even 100 days into this administration yet. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you can, donate to Status Coup. It's only $5 a month, and the link will be down in the description. It would really help out. We do on-the-ground journalism. We're going to be covering a lot of these events that are coming up. We try to go to protest. We try to go to union organizing. We do live streams every day at 5. If you have not seen those, almost every day at 5. We also do lives on the ground. Right now, we are attempting to hire another on-the-ground journalist to cover things that are happening where they're happening. We've gone to East Palestine when the train derailment happened. Tina Desiree Berg was out in California for the last massive lithium-ion battery fire. We have John Farina that has been covering the protests that have been happening on the ground across the country. Please check out our other live streams. Please donate if you can. And thank you guys so much for hearing us out today. Have a good one.